This is the most expensive video I've done yet because Alchemic Yoyo sent me the Tyrant. See that guy? He's made out of titanium. It's the Tyrant. Apparently, the Tyrant is based on another yo-yo, the Chronos. It's a bimetal from a company that I'm not sure exists anymore called So Serious. Supposedly people loved that thing, like people thought it was the best yo-yo that did the undercut thing, but the Chronos itself was based on an earlier yo-yo, the X3 Zeus. I dig the iterative stuff. I've never touched a Chronos or Zeus in my life. This undercut thing just doesn't really appeal to me. It's on the Avant-Garde 2 and the Glacier Express, and honestly, none of those yo-yos interest me. They just don't. But the Tyrant, for some reason, the way it was executed just had me feeling a type of way. It really made me want to grab the JDS Genesis. I was into the design of the Tyrant. For some reason, I just didn't notice this undercut though. I just thought it was like a rim ledge. Nope, that straight up goes in there. It's got a little inner lip in the hub from that. It's neat. The Tyrant did the whole undercut thing in a pretty subtle way. I'm into it. But in general with titanium yo-yos, well, I'm a college student. I don't think about them titanium yo-yos very often. I've played with a handful of titanium yo-yos. People in my area bring them to club meets and stuff. But actually owning them and keeping them, it's rare for me. So I really appreciated when Alchemic sent me one for review. But even though Alchemic sent me one for review, it does not change my thoughts in any way. They didn't pay me to say anything, nor did they ask me to. They actually asked me to be dead honest. So, the Tyrant is the third D-sized bearing yo-yo I've owned. The other two being the Assassin V1 and the Brassy Dawn. There have been others that I've tried that are just kind of around. I've tried an Assassin V2, definitely some others that I just can't remember right now. But D-sized bearings are neat. I think the trade-off with D-sized bearings is something like they don't spin as powerfully, but they spin more quickly than C-sized bearings. Something to do with how they're smaller in diameter, but they're the same width as C-sized bearings. So you don't get something like with A-sized bearings where they're mostly used for responsive yo-yos. But there's sort of like a half rule that if you make a yo-yo with a D-sized bearing, it's got to be undersized. Pretty much all of the D-sized bearing yo-yos I've played with are undersized in some way. I only know of one that isn't, and it's the D-starter from Sturmpanzer. The Tyrant is an undersized guy. So, about titanium. To be completely honest, I'm not a huge fan of titanium as a material. On rims, it's fine. It's another material on the rims that's a bit fringed like brass, but these full titanium yo-yos? Like I said, man, I'm a college student. Titanium on its own is expensive, and it costs even more to machine because of how hard titanium is. Machinists go through more tooling to machine titanium. And look, I get the fun. Titanium is fun. The yo-yo is shiny, and it makes loud tingy noises. The whole premium aspect of titanium is cool, but brother, titanium is luxury. Just gotta say it. The benefits of titanium aren't such that you're missing out on anything big with aluminum, at least with play. I know some goobers are going to be like, ooh, but actually... Yeah, but actually you're very often spending over $300 for a single yo-yo. Emphasis on very often, there are exceptions, but it's like spending $300 on a pair of nice jeans. Yeah, they're probably made of really nice long staple length cotton and selvage denim and made in Japan with purely natural indigo. But they're still just jeans, and if you're not in a place where you can spend $300 on a pair of nice jeans, the $60 Wranglers or $40 clearance Levi's look really appealing. Especially when they're gonna serve the same purpose and also last you long enough to where it really doesn't matter. I spent about $40 on a pair of black Hollister skinny jeans in 2019 or something. They're still doing me good 5 years later. Yo-yos are the same deal. You can spend $45 on a Graviton Y or $400 on a Matavity. Guess what? Same deal. Gonna treat you the exact same. But also guess what? If you have the kind of cash to justify it and enjoy it without thinking about it, then yeah, there's no problem with going premium. A lot of the time, that premium good stuff is premium good stuff for a reason. It's not just spending money for spending money's sake. But I just wanted to get my grievances with titanium out there. It's cool, but I'm broke. On to how the Tyrant plays. The first thing, because it's the funniest, the Tyrant is good for the DNA. Dead serious. You gotta land on the right spot. You can't just do a full 90-degree spin. He's got the nipple thing in the hub. But the way this cup is made, It's weirdly super good for the finger spinning. I'm gonna leave that in, that's really funny. But I digress, I just thought it was kind of funny. For the actual relevant stuff, the Tyrant is a powerful little guy. Definitely has some solid kick for a little dude, and it feels pretty solid too. Lots of undersized yo-yos kind of get that vibe. They get really dense and solid feeling because you gotta pack that material into a small area. Some people may not like it as much, but I'm kind of just like, whatever about it. Same deal with the Tyrant for me. It feels nice and solid and powerful, but spin power can kind of fall off a little quickly. That's the main drawback with these smaller yo-yos. Once you put some G's on them and you get the force kicked into them, that smaller diameter can hold them back. So even though I have this nice, dense, and powerful yo-yo, if I put a bit too much into it and I just don't emphasize technique enough, the Tyrant can blow over. The double whammy of the way the walls are in combination with the smaller diameter just makes it that way. But it's really good if you get going clean, because the other benefit of a yo-yo with a bit smaller of a diameter is that they rarely have a very forward rim-weighted sluggishness. It's got this really nice maneuverability and cozy pacing that just goes through tricks. You can drive up the pace just a little bit with your tricks and kind of just thrash, though it kind of struggles with rail combos. The walls and the weight distribution are prone to kind of just blowing out. You can get the yo-yo moving quickly, but if you can't quite keep it cleanly on that rail, the Tyrant it'll bite back. Where I think this yo-yo really shines is when you have a more laid-back, casual session and you want to intermittently pick up the pace and hit some less strenuous bangers. So if you like tech or are more flowy, I can see you really liking the Tyrant. In general, for tech, the Tyrant is really nice. The gap is a bit tight, so if you're going to pack those layers, try to emphasize some cleaner technique, but it's powerful enough to handle the tech just fine. And considering its undersized nature, yeah, it can get between those tight string gaps perfectly fine. It's not going to be hitching up on those tight string formations. Maybe catching a swinging slack might be a bit tougher, but I personally didn't have any trouble. Chopsticks are also easy because it's so small, but it's not particularly great for intense banger zoning type tricks. Like I said with the rail combos, the walls in tandem with the smaller diameter makes it kinda easy to blow over. And with how demanding certain zoning tricks can be, they're a tough break for the Tyrant. It is what it is. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you this yo-yo is built for busting bangers. For Zontals, it's kinda just fine. Maybe just slightly below the bar for me saying it's good for Zontals. You don't need to emphasize good technique for Zontals with the Tyrant, but it definitely helps. I like it. It's good, but Tyrant's no miracle. Like I said earlier, the Tyrant truly shines when you're not popping off and going nuts. And I'll explain with the comparisons. For comparisons, the Brassy Dawn, another D-sized bearing yo-yo, the Hobbit Gungnir, a solid little undersized guy, and the Golden Standard, the Shutter. I'll start with the Brassy Dawn just because they're both D-sized bearing yo-yos. To start, the Tyrant is just more pleasant. I've been playing with another yo-yo basically all day. A certain yo-yo that will also be getting a video soon. And you know how when you've been yo-yoing all day and your callus starts to get kind of sensitive? Well, between the Tyrant and the Brassy Dawn, the Tyrant just didn't tug on my finger as much. It moved a bit easier, didn't feel as heavy, and was still able to keep up with me. I'll be honest, when I went to AB them, I barely played with the Brassy Dawn for a minute at first. It just tugged on my fingers too much. The Brassy Dawn felt heavier and it took a bit more effort to move around than the Tyrant. In general, I'd say the Brassy Dawn is actually a bit faster than the Tyrant, and a bit more powerful, but for stability, the Tyrant edges it out on the Brassy Dawn a little bit. It's just got lower walls, and even though the Tyrant has these big curved walls, they don't fill in the gap as much as the walls in the profile of the Brassy Dawn. For Zontals, they're a similar tier of performance, but for different reasons. The profile of the Brassy Dawn makes it so you gotta emphasize technique a bit, but the power and pacing of the Brassy Dawn lends it to feeling a bit more natural for Zontals, as opposed to the Tyrant, which has a slightly better profile, but a hair less power and a more reined-in pacing. I'd say I slightly prefer the Tyrant over the Brassy Dawn. The Tyrant is more comfortably maneuverable, and honestly, I just prefer the more forgiving profile of the Tyrant. On to the next guy. The Hobbit Gungnir. It's a similar story to the Brassydon comparison with one major difference. Where the Brassydon weighed heavy and tugged on my fingers with the power and the more filled-in profile and all that, the Hobbit Gungnir is similar, but it doesn't have the drawbacks that come with being an organic like the Brassydon. So, when compared to the Tyrant, this basically means that the Hobbit Gungnir just kind of outclasses the Tyrant when it comes to raw performance. The Hobbit Gungnir is more powerful, more stable, and faster than the Tyrant. Where the Tyrant beats the Gungnir is in comfortability. The Tyrant is more laid back, whereas the Hobbit Gungnir is properly equipped for bigger and more aggressive combos. The Hobbit Gungnir tugs on my fingers a bit, and the Tyrant is a nice reprieve from that. Basically, Tyrant is more casual than the Hobbit Gungnir. I do prefer the Hobbit Gungnir because of its more performative aspects, though. Finally, moving to the Shutter. Between the Tyrant and the Shutter, the Tyrant is a bit heavier, more powerful, and not quite as fast. The Shutter just moves through its combos quicker and a bit lighter. Since the walls aren't as filled in with the Shutter, it's also more stable. But those are the only things that the Shutter has that are better than the Tyrant. I'll just come out and say it, I prefer the Tyrant over the Shutter. It's more solid feeling, it's more powerful, it's more comfortable, it's more approachable. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually got worried that there was something... I'm not gonna lie, I actually got worried that there was something wrong with my Shutter's bearing because the Tyrant was just spinning longer. I checked, there's nothing wrong with my Shutter's bearing. For some reason my Shutter just isn't spinning as long or as powerfully. Maybe it's the pads, I can't really tell, but overall, the Tyrant is a tight little guy. I recorded an unboxing for it because I said I was going to do that ages ago, and I never did. Yeah, I decided I'm not going to be doing unboxings. It came with neat knickknacks, though. Like, the blue rocks. Got some blue rocks. Here's the box it came in, by the way. It's a really cool box. This is a string. It's a really weird string. It's silver and gold, and it has a really weird texture. Go back. But in general, I like the Tyrant. It's really good for the type of yo-yo it is. Chill, performant enough to sesh with, maneuverable, and nice. It's not necessarily my favorite flavor of yo-yo, but like, you gotta have that variety. It's called the spice of life for a reason. Gonna put it in A tier. It's good. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. Stay healthy, everyone. Adios.